क्या हाल है एरिक कैसे हो आप?
Maybe cool.
Hey man, I have lots to discuss with you. First of all, you were an unexpected surprise at my friend Prakhar's wedding. I did not expect to see
So were
you.
you?
Yeah, it was just a strange table of people. I mean, those two, Kushal and Abhijit, are notorious in India, but having you there, sitting with us, and then I dropped a picture with you and my friend Arpit Bala, and that broke the Indian internet for a while
Was
because
that right?
yeah, because he's huge in the memes and he's the most memed person on the Indian internet right now, and
Wow,
they couldn't believe it.
that's very funny. I
Yeah,
mean, look, it was a wonderful wedding. Had a really good time, and it was also sort of interesting to see like Kushal and Abhijit in that different setting. I had them to the Bombay gym as our guests, and I realized, what was I doing? Was I going to scandalize South Bombay? Um, but yeah, I mean, I loved just the diversity of people that we were hanging out with. It's fun.
yeah, that was the internet table. But let me tell you how I first learned about you.
Okay.
I was in college in 2016. My mind was ready for red pilling. I was an Indian kid who had come to America, and I thought I was the shit. Topper in school, fantastic at the English language, debating, speaking. I thought I could win America. In 2015, I landed in Boston, and I can't even croak a few words of English.
What?
I just couldn't think in the language,
Hmm.
and I felt all kinds of shy and underconfident, and I started to work on myself. During that time, I learned that podcasts were a thing, right? And then something happened. I This word woke or anti-woke seemed to penetrate college campuses, and then I heard another term called the intellectual dark web. That was 9 years ago,
Okay.
and it was you, Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, your brother Brett Weinstein. And for me to now sit with you is very surreal. If you could describe what was that moment in time that led you to become so popular on the internet?
It's a very weird moment where it became uh, seditious and dangerous to say ordinary things. If you used your own eyes and said what you saw, you were called up as a heretic. And I think we don't realize how far the institutions have degraded themselves that we can now survive their hit pieces, the barbs, the name calling, and say, okay, well, that's just them. Um, these were very powerful institutions. And I believe that we were in a moment of madness. I mean, worldwide madness coming out of the US. And so we talk about mass delusions. And I think, woke doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. What you're talking about is you're talking about revolutionary. And these woke people really were just revolutionaries. Um, they were trying to destroy the institutions that they had infiltrated. So they had gotten themselves hired inside of, let's say, newspapers, magazines like Harper's or The Atlantic, universities. And their passion was to bring down that infrastructure by using its vulnerabilities against it. So I think that's really what happened. This was akin to a Marxist revolution.
I sometimes I'm surprised by how seriously Americans take speech and articles and diatribes. But it seems to me that 9 years later, uh, except for maybe the cultural tide in America, the cultural political tide in America shifting slightly toward the right, nothing much has changed. I see that American society is very articulate, very verbose, very much about talking. It's like they value critical thinking or talking a lot about what they believe in. But the hijack of institutions, is that still prevalent? Do you still find
Sure.
yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. We've lost our institutions. We've lost our minds. We've lost our sensibility. This was huge, man. This was like really, you know, we couldn't rebuild our society now if we had to. We're living off of what was built by people who could come to some sort of understandings and agreements. And we've lost the ability to agree on anything. You just take this Charlie Kirk assassination. Well, what happened? You know, what was this an international conspiracy? Was Turning Point USA supposed to, trying to kill him? Was it his wife? It's so stupid. We're in some sort of world in which nobody can come to ground truth. We don't have any concept of something actually happened. And now, of course, with AI, I've now watched video episodes that I've never done of me.
That's crazy.
Right. And so, in part, we've lost ground truth. And that's huge. It's really important. It's a catastrophe. And we're going to see the unwind of our world.
But when you say you've lost a sense of what it meant to be civil in America, or perhaps be coherent in America, or to agree across the aisle, is there a time in the past where this was true, where you...
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So since we're sitting here in India, let me bring up the famous example of The Jungle Book as an animated movie. If you think about Shere Khan, he's unfailingly polite. He's extremely genteel. He represents the British and their fetishization of manners. But of course, the British were savage, right? The same people who put heads on pikes outside the Tower of London were very focused on how one should behave in a drawing room, or not to drink our finger bowls, or whatever these, faux pas are. And so this concept of gentility is often coupled directly to savagery. You see the same thing, for example, in the remnants of the Ottoman Empire. If you visit Istanbul, one of the most feminine cities anywhere. I mean, the grace of the glassware and the styles of the architecture, and you could afford to be feminine the way, say, Jimi Hendrix or Vin Diesel would wear a boa, because you're so overwhelmingly masculine that you don't need to prove yourself. And so in a certain sense, that gentility comes only from strength. And so what I was advocating for, in part with civility, was not that we be weak, that we be strong, and we conduct ourselves like civilized people who do not unsheath a sword frivolously. There's an old saying, which is seldom quoted in modern times, but maybe Christopher Hitchens was the only one I've heard it from, which is, a gentleman is defined as a man who is never rude by accident. It's not that he's never rude, but he knows where the lines are. And my feeling is that what we just did is we frivolously abused shunning, for example, called it cancel culture. So we need shunning and shame. But what we did was we used it frivolously, so now it has very little normal effect. And by the way, we're in the middle, and I was just talking about this on another podcast, of a worldwide shame fetish. Shame is so hot right now.
Yeah.
And who does shame better than India? I don't know anyone.
It's very interesting because right now everyone on the internet, not just India, is, like you said, weaponizing shame.
But
if you
not just weaponizing, enjoying.
Yeah, if you look at the comment section, what's happening with Piers Morgan right as we speak, he tried to, I guess, degrade Nick Fuentes in some way, and suddenly people are going after his wife.
After Piers Morgan's wife.
After Piers Morgan's wife. Well, it's this phenomenon where, to cancel a man, you dig up his wife's past. They did it with Logan Paul. They've done it with Piers. They try to do it with Akash Singh from Flagrant. And the internet just piles on in a way which you bring that shaming back home, and the husband and the wife have to have a discussion on how to combat it. But I will say this about America. It's a land of free speech. I think it's the one thing that almost all Americans I've met, my friends from college, people I've met on this recent trip that I went on, despite all the problems, you value and revere free speech. Now, in contrast, in India, our free speech laws in the Constitution are a little fuddled, a little complicated.
So are ours.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at, say, Brandenburg versus Ohio, or if you were to look at the Atomic Energy Acts of 1946 and 1954, we put all sorts of restrictions on speech. We're just very weird about it because we say something, we give with one hand, namely the First Amendment of the Constitution, and we take with another hand because you can't, for example, cause people to doubt the armed services when they are recruiting in the face of a war, right? This whole concept of clear and present danger and all of these things are adjustments to the doctrine of free speech. Furthermore, just not to get in front of your point because I quite like it, we're not honest about what the magic of free speech is. The magic of free speech is not being an ass. It's shouldering the responsibility of free speech and not bringing up somebody's mother's sexuality just because you can.
Yeah.
And so this idea that, the Milo Yiannopoulos of the world are somehow free speech, no, they totally don't understand what free speech is. If you want to keep free speech, you use it when you need it. And you check to see that you have the full range of it. But for God's sakes, you don't squander it talking about the sexuality of a man's wife or his mother or his daughter.
Yeah, I feel like there is a special place in hell for people who are able to become public intellectuals on the basis of slander, because it's something that I'm very uncomfortable with. In India, our public discourse is confrontational only in the parliament. And it's in India, it's I was reading up some of the stuff about your childhood, how you grew up in this very competitive debate-like household where you and your brother would talk and debate about ideas all the time. I could be wrong and I could be attacked for this, but I feel like we are very eager to come to agreements because we would rather make friends than be intellectual enemies.
How interesting.
And it's this, because I personally do not like disagreements, because I have to now pretend to listen to my friend who I know is wrong, but I would rather be like, okay, fine, you're right. I would rather like to move on.
Is it possible that you're wrong? No.
No, it's completely possible. It's very interesting because the pursuit of truth takes you to very uncomfortable places, and sometimes when you want to, maybe I'm sounding simplistic, when you want to save face or you want to keep friendships, you choose the path of compassion, knowing in your heart that the truth will eventually prevail, or the truth is less important than the relationship.
See, I think this is fascinating. I don't think that pursuing the truth and using free speech to its fullest is anything like this image of brutal truth.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, I very much value highly diplomatic cultures. So, for example, Arab society is famously diplomatic, as is Turkish, as is Indian, because to give offense unnecessarily invites violence, invites permanent
resentment, the worst,
schisms, feuds that last decades, right? And so in some sense, the pursuit of truth is all about control of your instrument. And I think that we have a very bad meme at the moment, which is that truth is brutal. There's so many different ways to present the truth. There's no reason to present it in a way that is maximally frontal.
I love that. I had assumed you would be a free speech maximalist in the most crass way possible.
I am a free speech maximalist. I am not a free speech absolutist. And to me, free speech is all about care. It's a little bit like leaving the washroom on a flight in at least the same state in which you find it. If everybody badly behaves, by the end of the flight, you don't want to go in there.
That's true. I was going to say, I do think that because we have, well, my friends like Kushal are going to argue differently, but I think because we have so many restrictions on free speech, we end up becoming extremely creative in the way we speak, because circumvention
interesting.
Circumvention and saving face and saying things in innuendos becomes an art form in itself.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's a great art form because it actually it's like a constraint. When you have constraints, creativity is born.
Yeah, say
Right?
more.
It's like saying if I want to talk about Modi and I can't even say it. Like I can say Trump is a stupid buffoon and nothing bad will happen to me. I'm not saying that the BJP government is going to come and attack me if I say Modi is bad. But if I, push it too much, sure, there's going to be consequences. Do I believe this? No, I'm giving out an example. We say things in hypotheticals in India to get away with a lot. Our comedians, the ones that are very political, face the ire of politicians because it's too dangerous to talk about politics. So they say it in innuendos. It's like the best example I have of this is I was in college and there was this class I took with the professor. It was called The History of the Modern Middle East. And she was talking about a certain, I think it was Bashar al-Assad's father or Hafiz, I don't know what his name was.
Hafez al-Assad?
Yes, that guy. In that society, they talked about how something had happened and he'd become larger than life.
Yeah.
He'd become like the father of the nation.
Sure.
Right? So a comedian did a stand-up set and he had an empty chair and he said, well, hello, friends, you, me, and the president. And he would keep referring to the president as the empty chair. It leads to these interesting situations, but I really want to be able to come or try to work toward a society that actually has some of what America has, which is this free speech. How do you think that, I mean, is free speech in America a consequence of the Constitution? Is it a consequence of the people that propagate it further? And do you think the same thing can be done in a country like ours?
It's a great question. Really a good question. I don't know. I believe that in the US, it's a collision between a culture that had gone through, let's say, the Scottish Enlightenment and other enlightenments. Like there's also the Jewish Enlightenment. It's a document, the Constitution is a document for a post-Enlightenment culture. And the question about Indian Enlightenment and Indian secularism versus India, India finding its way as a nation, because it's not a natural country. It's a collection of states with very strong personalities and subcultures upon subcultures. So to call something India is already, I frequently draw the analogy to Italy. Italy is not a natural country.
Sure.
Right? So what can one do? One has to model how to speak, right? And this is, for example, I gave a description the other week to an economist where I described Harvard as the collision of the sharpest minds with the sharpest elbows. And then he had asked about a conflict between two members of the economics department. And I named both names and I said, well, one of them represented the sharpest minds. And I left the other unsaid. Now, in other words, the dots remained to be connected and I didn't need to connect them because I wasn't looking to skewer that person. Uh-huh. But there's a certain amount of care that you have to use when speaking about divisions in a highly multicultural society. So the intra-Indian diversity is off the charts. Americans don't see it, but my God, I mean, this is like India itself is the most diverse place you could possibly be. There's so much happening inside of it. And that's going to make it very difficult to know when you're causing offense. So for example, my closest friend from college invited me to India in 1985. And I put my foot at some point on a phone book, an old phone directory. And because it was a Muslim household that revered the Quran and all books are related to the Quran, putting my foot on any book, even a phone book, was an absolute no-no. Now, of course, the white guy doesn't know not to do that. But my point being that when you're dealing between communities, it's extremely important to have a concept of charity, to have a concept of diplomacy, one of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those things, I think, are very well practiced in India. And I would say build the free speech concept in India that is intrinsically Indian. Don't copy some thing that required something that happened in Scotland if it never happened here, right? And so, in part, gosh, I'm just trying to think of if I have any examples.
We have examples of, I can't name a specific example. I know of many Indian kings that had courts where scholars would come and argue from all across the world and try to arrive at some kind of a truth. We did have that culture.
Okay, so for example, the way in which sharab is used in Urdu and in poetry and ghazal singings, where
Sharab as an alcohol, right?
well, is it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. So the whole point is that are we referring to that, or are we referring to being, drunk on the ecstasy of Sufi excess? I don't. And so, when you're talking about the beloved, are you talking about God? All of these techniques were used to convey something like eroticism or inebriation without running afoul of very strong social structures. Or, for example, in Turkey, you're not allowed to depict pictures of, let's say, peacocks, but you can write a poem in script that has the form of a peacock, right? And so, so very subtle ways of evading and playing with the boundaries. And, here's a Bollywood example. If you think about Chole ke piche, what is it? What is under my...
Sure.
Okay.
Blouse. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's my heart. Okay. Yeah, maybe. And that kind of...
and then you've got Cardi B's Wet Ass Pussy, that song.
Right. And that's what's wrong with it. It's not that we're prudes. It's that there's no art in it. Right? And so you used to have to work to understand the meaning. And wasn't that better that you could talk about something almost frontally, but come at it from the side at the last moment so that it doesn't need to become unnecessarily crude?
You are a son of California, and so was Charles Bukowski. I would love for Charles Bukowski to have a meeting with Rumi. It's just two different forms of literature, right?
Sure. It's a good example. There is beauty to be found in the gutter. And, when Rabelais...
I love him, by the way. I think he's fantastic.
When Rabelais talks about beloved syphilitics, in Gargantua and Panic, no, I mean, he addresses this. Or, I don't know if you know this poem of E. Cummings, The Boys I Mean Are Not Refined, sometimes called the holograph poem because it was written out longhand. And I thought,
don't know.
Oh, the boys I mean are not refined. They go with girls who buck and bite. They do not give a fart for art and hump them 13 times a night. That's how it begins. And then it says, it ends with something that reminded me when the Trump administration came in. They say whatever's on their mind. They do whatever's in their pants. The boys I mean are not refined. They shake the mountains when they dance. This concept of, it could be the menace in Thin Lizzy's The Boys Are Back in Town.
Yeah, I've heard that song, yeah.
Right. And so, in part, why did Hitchcock, the great director, not show us the murder of Janet Leigh early in his film, where he kills off his main female character almost at the instant, almost as soon as the film begins? Using the mind properly is... You have to avoid WAP. Not because you have to avoid the subject matter.
Yeah. What would you say about someone like a Cardi B?
Oh, for example, if you just think about that as an example, what does the Kama Sutra say? It talks about eating the mango fruit. Very akin to T.S. Eliot's Do I Dare to Eat a Peach? Where the idea is that sort of indulgence, obviously referencing something close to cunnilingus, is or fellatio, is discussed in reference to fruit. And the idea of drawing the parallel someplace where it can be described. And, why did I choose those two words? Because they're less frontal.
Oh.
So I think that, it's really important to think about this concept that I've tried to point people at, of Russell conjugation. So I don't know if you've ever read my article on this in Edge.
I have not.
Bertrand Russell noticed something very odd. And I had been searching for it. I didn't know anybody had found it. What do we think about the concept of a synonym in English? Synonym is something like two words that mean the same thing. But do fink and whistleblower mean the same thing? At a content level, they do. But the emotional shading is totally opposite. So Bertrand Russell said, I am steadfast, you are stubborn, he, she, or it is a pig-headed fool. And the key point is the underlying fact remains the same, but the emotional instruction direction differs.
I love that. As someone who grew in Hindi, we call synonyms pray vachi shabd, and my dadi, my grandmother, was a Hindi teacher. Pray vachi.
Vachi, and shabd is word.
Shabd is word, right?
What's the first?
Pray vachi.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's synonyms, but in Hindi. And while I was growing up, learning Hindi as a subject.
Right.
It used to be an essential part of grammar to learn synonyms. And that really helps populate your imagination with all kinds of Hindi words that, I think one of the problems that modern people have is that they want to say a lot of things, but they're stuck with good, great, best.
Sure.
Right? And which is why I wanted to ask you, you're from the hard sciences. That requires a degree of aloneness, isolation, pondering. And I have this idea of myself in the head. This writer, 5 years down the road, writing great poetry, great books. And this idea is somehow punctuated by my phone. I don't want to be simplistic and say, okay, my phone is the problem, but
your phone is the problem.
In some way, I find that there is no one teaching me anymore, or there is no good example in my life someone who ponders, someone who thinks. I feel like everything I read online is just regurgitated outlines and headings. There is no original thought. And I'm not sure 20 years from now, I could have it. And if I do decide to go on that route, it seems painful and lonely and anachronistic.
Yikes. What are you going to do?
I'm going to ask you.
That's a good question. Look, in some sense, podcasting is the thing that's going in the other direction. Because people will listen to a very long podcast multiple times, indicating that attention spans haven't actually collapsed. But we don't feel comfortable using our minds to explore and wander without an immediate point. We've been trained to use our visual cortex too much and our closed eyes too little, right? And so when it comes to, if you were to write a great poem, to whom would you read it?
To friends?
Yeah, but very few of them will care. I can tell you some great poems that have been written recently. And there's no audience for it. There's no ability to trade it, right? And so, here's a question. Do you have any poems memorized?
No. None that I can think of, no. I've written many poems, and talk about trade. They've been shared on Instagram many times.
Okay.
Which is a good medium to do it on. But say more.
Well, if I were to say the sun was shining on the sea, shining with all its might, he did its very best to make the billows smooth and bright, and this was odd because it was the middle of the night. That's not familiar to you.
No.
So I can't quote to you, the time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings. That should be in our common vocabulary so that we can trade a slight reference without having, I should be able to say, the time has come, the walrus said, right? And I don't need to complete it. But now that we've lost that call and response, And, I think about this loss of canon. I probably have 20 minutes worth of poems stored in my head.
You've committed them to memory since you were a kid?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just visited 2 of them. And, maybe I'm not word for word, but, I gave this example recently of Eliot writing April is the Cruelest Month, at the beginning of the Wasteland. And it's an echo of the Middle English that everyone is supposed to be taught from the British system. One that the prill with the shorter sota, the drocht of marcheth persa to the rota, and bothered every vein and switch the core, which vertu engendered is the floor. People don't hear that these are 2 different versions of April. And that Eliot is bridging the States and the UK with a nod to Chaucer at the beginning of literature in the modern era. These were all interconnected. They were all a series of self-references. And you have this in a weird way in India with a different canon, right? So you have, the Mahabharata, you have the Upanishads, whatever these Indian references are.
Uh-huh.
And those don't have high currency outside in the US.
I remember reading The Wasteland in school, and we had to dissect what it was. But I feel like in our generation, there's an amnesia to those things. Why would I want to waste my time reading what a poet referenced in another poem of his? The excess of information that I have has corroded my ability to discern what is canon, what is prestigious, or what is pure, and what should be discarded.
It means much less than you would imagine, in my opinion, that we have the perfect canon. The most important thing is that we have a shared canon. Right?
But isn't that more values? Like we share.
So assume that it's imparted artificially through school. The school makes a choice. We're all going to read The Lord of the Flies.
Sure.
Or we're all going to read Freedom at Midnight, or whatever the hell we're supposed to read. At least we will have some kind of knowledge that what's in my head and what's in your head shares something. Right? So, for example, to fellow Jews, I say, don't wait for the bread to rise, because it's a reference to who got out of Egypt. Were those who did not wait for the bread yeast to puff the bread up. And so we eat the bread of affliction once a year. Every Jew knows the same reference. It's a way of signaling each other. And in a certain sense, the ways that Indians signal each other. If I quote a Bollywood song, nobody around me in the U.S. knows what. And everyone in India should. And so, it doesn't matter what the vocabulary is, as long as it's rich enough to convey dangerous ideas, powerful ideas. And, so we've already been through the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. We've referenced the Kama Sutra, E. E. Cummings, Chaucer, Eliot. We have to have commonality. And it can't all be about Nick Fuentes.
I think you're right. One of the ways in which, in my travels across the world, I relate with other travelers is references to music. And they are delighted by knowing that I know some of their customs.
Give me an example.
So, for example, with my Jewish friends, I know what Shabbat Shalom is. I can proudly say I was in Israel for 5 days. I've eaten some of the bread, a few things here and there, enough to get by, where there's some kind of a kindredness of spirits, but not enough to, I know what the Torah is. I know who Moses was, stuff like that. But I think you're right. I have this friend who watches plays and reads a book a day and is older than I am. And he, like you, can recite poems and quotes on the spot, as if it's almost like I would need a Notion document. I would need a Notes app but he just has it in memory. It's maybe just a consequence of of a different time.
I'm very old. All right. I just turned 60.
I know. Happy birthday.
Well, thanks. You bastard. It feels very ancient. And I think people just don't remember why we remember things, right? There's a reason that you don't just look it up on the internet, because you don't have it stored client side next to your CPU in the brain. You can't make the connections if you're constantly checking to see where that thing is, right? And so you have to keep a fair amount of it between your own ears, because that's how you realize that these things, are all connected.
Let me ask you this. I didn't have enough time to go to the American gun range when I was in America. I was there after 6 years.
Okay.
And I was really looking forward to it because I know America is very divided on guns, but as an external visitor, I really enjoy the absolute
They're
freedom.
fun.
They're so much fun, right? Like just seeing those. And I was talking to some army men in the country. It's like off camera, they all say we need some gun influencers in the country because that will really help bolster the spirit of the army. But we have different laws here. I couldn't go to the gun range, but in my last few days in America, I started thinking about it is so interesting that two countries, one supposedly a country depending on which side you're on, thousands of miles away, divide a country, which I'm in, which is supposedly the most powerful country in the world. Israel and Palestine, thousands of miles away, have divided Americans. How is that conflict so central to American political discourse?
It isn't. This is just the power of the internet and the genius of the Palestinian Arabs and their supporters. What an amazing job the Arab world and the Muslim world did with the propaganda opportunities of the phone and the internet. Look, whatever you think about this region, there are two groups of people who have claims to the same land.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not here to adjudicate that. I don't care. What this wasn't was genocide. Completely ridiculous use of the term. This was a major innovation in warfare by Sinwar. And you have to track genius in war. So, for example, LTTE and the Tamil Tigers were ingenious in their use of suicide bombings.
Mm-hmm.
That spread to the Middle East with the barracks bombing in Lebanon. This is just a description of fact, right? There was the golden age of airline hijacking in the 70s, which gave way to the golden age of suicide bombing. What this was an ingenious use of IDF-assisted martyrdom operation, a society-wide IDF-assisted martyrdom operation. This guy realized that he could sacrifice enormous numbers of people and get incredible video, and that video could be presented to the world to, in large measure, turn it against the Israelis. Ingenious, brilliant. I'm not speaking about it morally. I'm just saying what it was. And then you have this, amplification network, largely due to Qatar. And Qatar is playing this incredibly complicated game by being a U.S. ally and being the thorn in Israel's side and brokering peace and pretending it's Switzerland of the middle. I don't even know. I'm not smart enough to figure this out. Yeah, it divides people in part also because we can't stand to watch it. You think about what the U.S. did with the bombing of Tokyo and the bombing of Dresden. These were not genocidal acts in World War II of the United States. We've lost the taste for war, which in many ways is a great thing. And so we can't stand to watch these images. And the Israelis are saying, look, we're fighting for our lives. If Israel wanted to obliterate Gaza, it could have obliterated Gaza. It has the military might. And the fact is, they just didn't understand. They were outplayed. This was not, human shields is the old terminology. The new terminology should be something like we're not targeting. You put a tunnel-based targeting underneath an old age home, hospital, a mosque, in order to get your adversary to bomb it, to blow it up. And in Human Shield, you're trying not to get your adversary to fire. Here, you're trying to get your adversary to come after you. And hopefully, they'll knock out an old age home or a hospital or a mosque or a church. And then, you take video of it and it'll go around the world. Now, I think that's a description of what happened. I'm not here to tell you that the Israelis are a blameless group and that they're the most ethical fighting force in the world. That's their propaganda. I'm not going to get involved in that. But you have to admire the genius of Sinwar. And you have to admire the genius of the Israelis and, disabling Iranian Air Force defenses by being in country, or the crazy attack on Hezbollah through pagers and then walkie-talkies and then forcing people to gather. What you're dealing with is you're dealing with war between superminds. And I would say this is hybrid war, which is not a familiar term. And in hybrid war, you have a kinetic war, which Israel clearly won. And you have a war for hearts and minds, which, in my opinion, Israel clearly lost, and Hamas won. That's how I see it.
Just to give context on that, when I was in Israel, I went to Kibbutz Beeri, where the attack happened, met the survivors, met the first responders, saw horrific images. And when I landed in Delhi, went to a bar and my hands were shaking. I don't have any PTSD I haven't been in a war, but it was too intense. And I realized that 5 days had wrapped, and it took me a long time to come to peace with what I saw. I just saw images and videos that first responders showed to me. But, I was making a vlog just to highlight that I'm here in the middle of all of this, in the middle of the conflict. This was last year. And I was just showing the damaged Hamas trucks, and put a video on my Instagram. Within minutes, I had hundreds of comments calling me the meanest things.
Yep.
And a few people I knew who had the numbers off, who had hung out with several times, partied with them, sent me long messages with the most horrific abusive words that I have seen. And I have, said all kinds of things. No, it's fine.
It's not fine.
What it showed to me was these are Indian people. They have never stepped foot inside Israel or Palestine. They don't even know where it is on the map. If I asked them what are the neighboring countries, they wouldn't know. But what I was surprised by is that what do words like resistance, operation, oppression, the flag on a bio, Arabic that when you translate on Instagram converts to something that's abstract sounding, which is in the domain of the Rumis they've, read. It just makes it palpable enough for them to build an enemy in their head and start hating because they're bored.
Sure, but let me ask a question. How many of these Indians would recognize words like Nariman House, Oberoi, Taj, Cafe Leopold, VT Station? You went through a horrific attack in Bombay that I followed just on the heels of that attack. And to be entirely honest, my synagogue is here in Bombay. We don't have a synagogue in California. Our synagogue is here. And when we had our Hanukkah celebration, we had a giant menorah right outside Gateway. And we had I'm going to try not to get emotional. We had a multicultural police force protecting our families, celebrating right in the shadow of this massacre that Bombay was subjected to. You've been through what we went through as Jews. It's not like you don't know. You went through Palgam.
Uh-huh.
And it breaks my heart that you can't understand when we've understood exactly what India was subjected to. What this was. This is barbarism. And, and it's not the Islamic world. The Islamic world is divided about use of these tactics. And this is to take the side of the wrong part of the Muslim world, the side of barbarism, against the side of modernity and the side of decency. So my feeling is that India is going to continue to be subjected to horrific attacks like Palgam. We've seen the video of this guy ziplining, not understanding what's happening below. Come on, man. Open your heart. There's plenty of reason to be upset about things that Israel has done. Here, you've got to be kidding. The horror that was not shared on what happened on October 7th, because Israel chose not to share all of it. You've seen some of the video, right? This is what's called casus belli. It's provocation through atrocity. And my feeling about this is Bombay knows as well as any city on earth what this is like. And I stand with Bombay. So I don't understand why Bombay is having difficulty understanding this. I don't understand why India is having a difficulty understanding this.
I thank you for sharing that. I think some of it I attribute to a lack of knowledge. There is a desire to stand for something, but when you're unable to understand what to stand for, you stand for George Floyd or you stand for Black Lives Matter in America, when clearly your own country is riddled with caste problems, riddled with all kinds of inequalities.
I did not stand for Black Lives Matter.
And I don't mean you.
Yeah. But Black Lives Matter is a terrible organization with a wonderful slogan. Yeah, if somebody comes at you with an organization called Save the Adorable Baby Puppies, it doesn't mean that you should support that organization. You have to ask, what does that organization actually do? And just, to keep in mind, India's been amazing standing up for her Jews. All sorts of ways. So I'm insanely proud of how we Jews have been treated in India.
Yeah, it's I did not know, first of all, that your synagogue is here. I would assume, is that a thing that you're just like some people decide to have a church?
No, this is the synagogue that my wife's family attended. I've married into this community. It's not an Ashkenazi synagogue.
So help me understand. So if you marry your wife, you choose her synagogue as the only synagogue that you will go to?
We had a different congregation in San Francisco, but now, since the children have moved away, we've relocated to Los Angeles. We might choose a new synagogue, but I'm saying the only synagogue to which we are affiliated is Knesset Eliyahu.
What happens inside? I mean, as a non-Jew, I always wonder. I've been inside a church.
Man. Yeah, no, it's there's a central bima. This is a Sephardic style.
Okay.
I don't know if it's really Sephardic. It's really Mizrahi. So it's Middle Eastern Jews. They came from Aleppo and Baghdad in like the 1700s. They came to Calcutta on a merchant route. And then from Calcutta, many of them relocated to Bombay. And the women sit upstairs. The men sit downstairs. And they mumble a lot of stuff in prayer.
Hebrew? In Hebrew? Yeah.
And also other ancient Semitic languages, and the women sit up in the rafters and talk about who's marriageable, who would be a good match for their daughter. It's a social, pious thing, but it's also we're getting to the end of this. There were 3 communities of Jews in India historically, and our community, in my opinion, is the least interesting of them. They're just transplanted Middle Eastern Jews who came for commerce.
What's the architecture inside a synagogue? Like in a church, you've got benches on both sides and Jesus Christ is in the front.
There's an ark where the Torah is kept in the front, and there's an elevated platform. This is not the case in synagogues necessarily in the U.S., which is much more like, you'll see many more church-like synagogues that have borrowed from the Christian tradition. And the bima is where somebody will read the Torah, aloud. You're going through the book, so it's different sections as the year progresses.
And does the rabbi also tell you about how to live your life and do commentary? Like in a church, they will do that. Sometimes, if you in India, we have these guys called katha vachaks, which basically take a book, they take a religious book. It's a big event where everyone sits down. They read from the book. They sometimes sing bhajans, praises of God, but then they also do this extra commentary on Hindu society and how to live and whatnot. Does that happen in synagogues?
It does happen in synagogues, although, part of the problem, as you saw when you go to an Indian wedding, you have a pundit who's mumbling stuff that no one seems to understand, right?
Yeah.
And so this is part of the problem with ancient Hebrew, is that you're not necessarily, sometimes there'll be like a study group around it, so that if the concept of orthodoxy doesn't really exist outside of America, because we have Reform and conservative as two different traditions, but elsewhere, orthodoxy is just Jewishness. And so there isn't a lot of reform. So in part, this idea of the rabbi getting up and saying, I was walking to Pilates today and I realized, that thing is sort of weak Judaism. And India had strong Judaism. Follow the book, read the Torah, and then, very often people had no idea what was going on. So it was sort of more meaningless to them.
I wonder, let me take a tangent. In college, I had this Professor Yair Lior, and he taught this class called Religion and Science. I still regret not doing a podcast with him because I felt sick the day I invited him, and then he never spoke to me again. But it seems to me that many Jewish people can have the faith, do the practice, and still be as scientific as you are. There's just something more deep than revering or praying to a Jewish God.
It's a very funny question. Assuming that religions are somewhat made up for the moment, because they can't all be true.
Sure.
Why would a religion help you doing science? Why would storytelling? And, this is an interesting question on multiple levels. One thing I would say is that most people who do science as Jews are on their way out of the religion. So we don't really realize that people are always diffusing Judaism into the world. So if you start from an orthodoxy as somebody who has 12 children and is following the book very literally, are all 12 of those children going to be Orthodox? No. All right. So they're going to lose a bunch of them. And maybe some of those are going to be cultural Jews who are Reform. And then some of those, their kids, their grandkids, are going to be atheists. So in part, what you're seeing is Judaism diffusing Jewish thinking and reason into a world in which Jews aren't necessarily going to marry other Jews. They're going to stop being Jewish shortly. Furthermore, we don't even recognize how Judaism infiltrates all of our thinking. If you ever watched the show Seinfeld?
Sure. I've seen parts of it. Yeah.
Okay. Seinfeld is not only Jewish humor, it is specifically Talmudic legal humor. It's all about questions of law. So like regifting. If you're given a gift, can you give that gift as a gift, as if you yourself purchased it?
People do that all the time.
Well, okay. But the point is, in Judaism, you'd have an argument about that.
Wait, it's legal humor? It's the humor you're allowed to?
So, for example, the double dipping episode, where George Costanza goes to a funeral and he dips a chip into the bowl, and then he takes a second dip without eating the chip the first time. Like he's potentially putting his saliva back into the bowl through this practice. That's straight out of the Talmud. Two rabbis are having hummus. One of them is using a leaf and one of them isn't. And the one who's using the leaf goads his friend and says, how long are you going to feed me the filth of your backside? And the guy using no leaf at all says, and how long are you going to continue to feed me your saliva? Right? And so, in a weird way, these are all questions of adjudication. What constitutes an offense? What are the thresholds? What is the evidence? This is how Jews think. They walk all around a problem in order to understand it. So it's a very interesting thing that nobody knows, that Seinfeld, which is not played with all of these characters being obviously Jewish, like, Sex in the City is basically for gay men, but it's played through straight women. Right? And so,
Sure.
yeah. So the same way Seinfeld was all of these Jewish characters who aren't written necessarily to be Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about legal humor. So it's very funny that the world didn't notice what was being transmitted. So in some sense, this is, the whole world is attuned to Jewish humor and Jewish thought.
That is so interesting. Have you watched BoJack Horseman?
No.
You haven't?
No.
I think you would enjoy it. It's about this washed up. It's a world full of animals and humans, but they're all in the same universe.
Yeah.
And it's an adult animated series. It's about this washed up horse. He's a 90s sitcom star, and now he's an alcoholic. He's got a little bit of a pot belly, and he lives in a big mansion in LA.
Okay.
And it just talks about his washed upness and his struggles through Hollywood. It is a hilarious show. You grew up in California,
Yeah.
right? Do you still live in California?
Yeah. Well, I went on a walkabout for 37 years.
I find that something about the West, the end of the West,
Right.
as said in Red Hot Chili Peppers, end of Western civilization, California, that's where the West stops, literally. It's the place where great innovation and great madness happens. I often think something that happens in LA happens in Bandra a year later, right? The matcha comes there and disappears, and the matcha comes here, right? It's how Western-looking Indians, they look there and New York for inspiration. But California is also the subject of deep aspirations, where every single person that I know who's from my school knows the song California Dreamin'. California. And to me, it's funny that you said Indians should stand out and, make their own identities, and as the power structures are shifting.
Yeah.
I still feel like, what will we say? What will we talk about to the West, which is sort of like a place where all media disseminates itself to the world and we respond to it?
I don't understand this at all. So first of all, California Dreaming. What is the source of it? It's an East Coast song.
Really?
Yeah.
Mamas and Papas are an East Coast band?
I don't know that that's true. I think they were a West Coast band. But stopped into a church, they had along the way. I got down. Preacher likes the cold. He knows I'm going to say California Dreaming. Right? So, the idea is it's aspirational for the East Coast. By the way, it's also really hit the road, Jack. I don't know if you've noticed this.
What's that?
The Ray Charles song, dung, 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 hit the road, Jack.
No, I haven't heard it.
Walked into a church. You hold church a little bit too long for Hit the Road, Jack. It's just the progression cycling through four notes. Doesn't matter.
My strumming on the guitar is limited to about 7 chords, so I'm not the smartest in music theory.
Okay, so it's sa and then ni.
Equally
Como,
bad at that.
ni
I
como,
understand
okay.
C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's more.
Then never mind. Yeah, Bollywood is aspirational for an entire planet. You have an entire ecosystem that's focused on where Bollywood reached. So my feeling about this is India is aspirational. travel through Indonesia and have people come up to you, or through the old city of Jerusalem. They want to talk to you about Raj Kapoor.
Sure. There's actually a very funny incident. I'm sure you don't even know this, and I try to look it up on Twitter. This one night, many years ago, I was drunk, and I think I had an idea that I was gonna uh, write down the names of the global intellectuals that I knew and say who they look like. And for you, I wrote Kader Khan. I think you got offended and you wrote, I don't look like Raj Kapoor. And
I didn't.
I couldn't find that tweet. I really try to look for it. I maybe have, because that blew up. This was many years ago.
I didn't. I don't remember that. No, look. My feeling about this is so much about India is aspirational. People want the wisdom of India. They want the wealth of its palaces. They want the sumptuous silks, the over-the-top jewelry, spilling with sapphires and diamonds, the serenity of the Himalayas. I just don't think India should be thinking about California's aspiration.
Yeah.
You have Bangalore.
Sure.
And you have Rajasthan.
I love Rajasthan. Favorite state.
I love Rajasthan. And we just came back from Kerala.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I've probably lived 1 to 2% of my adult life in it. Not that much.
Every single time you tweet about how magnificent it is, I had Grok pull up all of them.
Oh. Well, just maybe 30 to 40% of my living and my stories come from 1 to 2% of my life here. And it's been such a gift for me. And, I'm not going to claim that I love the trash and my spiritual soul is quenched. It's not. It's just that this is such a cauldron of the world's best stuff.
I believe that too. For someone who had just gone to certain monuments in Jaipur, my mind was blown when I was on a 10-day road trip with my friend across Rajasthan. The people we saw, the elites, people on the roads, it changed my mind. And I was like, maybe I should traverse through the states.
It's impossible.
It's
an impossible place.
Let me ask you this. Do you know about Joe Dispenza?
Trigger my memory.
He's this meditation teacher who talks about the quantum field.
Oh my gosh. Sounds bad.
The reason I bring it up is, full disclaimer, in India we have in 11th and 12th grade, you can take streams. There's commerce with math, arts, humanities, and basically
science is the highest, commerce is the second, arts is the third. I think I've heard.
Yeah. So I am someone who had commerce with math, and my ability at math was so shit.
You don't know what your ability at math is.
We will get to that. That my teacher said it's better to drop it. So I dropped it. As a commerce without matherd, I grew up with this self-fulfilling feedback loop that physics and math and the sciences are serious business for serious people. And I'm in this small but beautiful domain of literature, arts, music, poetry, media, all of that. Now, this gentleman, Joe Dispenza, I went to his meditation retreat before I came here, back to India. And he, in his meditations, he keeps talking about there is a quantum field in physics where everything is possible. Now, you are a mathematician. You're someone who knows what this word means. Does any of this mean anything to you? Is there a way to arrive?
Sounds to me like he's trying to sleep with you or get you to give him some money, but I don't know for sure. And look, you are a quantum wave. That's what you are. I don't know that it helps you. Like, you're not a solid object in the sense that you probably think you are. So if you think about you have a book here with a hanging cord.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do that,
Mhm.
the wave travels. It's not that the molecules in the ribbon travel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you and I walked through that door of your studio, that was a medium, like this is a medium.
Mhm.
And you excited that medium into the Vin pattern, and I excited the same medium a second later into the Eric pattern. So yeah, it's completely mind-blowing, but it doesn't get you closer to Krishna. It doesn't inform you the way you're imagining. It's a question of, do you want to understand what existence is at a level that is highly impersonal? It's not, the universe does not appear to be about us. It's a cold and indifferent medium in which we are excitations and in which we play out our lives. And it's not a message anybody wants to hear, which is why Deepak Chopra is much more successful than I am at getting large numbers of people into ecstatic states over their quantum selves. And you know, by the way, I sort of subscribe to a certain amount of like astrology and palm reading and all of these things because it works for reasons people don't like to admit. It works because it allows us to dream. You know, if you want to do something, like if you want to take a trip, you don't really have the money to do it. And you go to a palm reader, and the palm reader says, I see you going on a voyage and you will never regret it. You're going to say, sure, I didn't want to go, but the palm reader told me I was going to go on an amazing voyage. You're going to take that trip. So we abuse the occult, the magical, the mystical. And if you don't allow yourself to be seduced by this madness, you're missing out on it. But it's what it is. It's a seduction.
That's a wonderful way of putting it.
And speaking of which, the same thing is true with wordsmithery. You know, that allowing us to believe things are much more magical and wonderful than they actually are is an incredibly important part of life.
How'd you bring back the beauty of the world to your cold scientific mind? That's the first part. The second part is, how did you, as a cerebral person, learn to read the room?
Let me try the first part and see if I even get to the second part. Look, I don't see science as cold. You have to know what not to dissect. So, for example, you know, when a young man meets a young woman and says, I don't know, I'm sort of, she's not from my community, but I can't stop thinking about her. I'll often ask him something like, did she smell good? And it's like, what kind of a question is that? Well, I know that, for example, scent is one way in which we test to see whether a potential mate might help combine immune systems to contribute to the viability of the offspring.
Sure.
As if somebody whose major histocompatibility complex contributes something that's not a member of your own might smell very good to you because that's a great potential mate. Now, if you reduce it to that, I feel sorry for you. You know, she smelled like a night blooming jasmine. You know, I couldn't stop thinking about her. That's more beautiful than saying I think this would be an acceptable mate based on the fitness of our offspring.
Or telling or saying that a woman's breasts are just balls of fat on the chest. But many great poems have been written about the bosom.
Yeah. So that is, I don't know whether you know this, that is the quintessential human attribute, that of approximately 5,000 mammalian species, only one has permanently engorged mammary glands, and that's us.
Not even orangutans?
No, they're not.
They have saggy tits.
They're not permanently. They're situationally.
Really?
Yeah. And we believe that it is because of our opposable thumbs. You know the story?
No.
So if I can grasp a remote, that gift of the opposable thumb creates a problem, which is that if I attempt to run on all fours,
I can't.
I can munch my thumb, and it's very dangerous. So I have to walk upright. So now I have an unstable situation with a high center of gravity and a great danger of falling. And what is the benefit of this is that gravity pulls on the breasts. And so a woman communicates her remaining fertility in part by showing how much her breasts resist gravity due to the youth and elasticity of her skin. So this idea of I'm a leg man, I'm a breast man, it's not really true. Everyone is a breast man. And the reason is that it's a credible indicator. Now, that is to rob every young man of the wonder of seeing a woman in an incredible sari, right?
Yeah. I have a funny joke for this. I actually have an answer. Men who are ass men generally come from first world countries because they're well fed. But in the third world countries, you're parched for milk. So that's why you're just very happy to see breasts.
I'm not going to engage that too much, but I will point out that there are fat deposits in Africa associated. Never mind. What was your second question?
I have now forgotten. Second question. Wait, let me try to jog my memory. The second question was exactly this, which is, how did you, as a cerebral man,
learn to
read the room? And I say this because I will just use that example. At my friend's wedding, we had one other person come and speak with us, right? It was me, my friend Hardik, you and your wife, and this other person was interesting, but I noticed about them that they wanted to engage with you cerebrally, and they were sort of unable to understand that the conversation was perhaps a little lighter, right? That if you meet your heroes or if you find someone interesting, you really just want to be like, hey, so I love your theory about string theory, whatever it is, right? And then just suck the energy out of the environment. And you assume that everyone else is this receptor of only cerebral conversation. We're going to be locking in to the magnificence of intellectual thought like that.
First of all, not everyone. How do I put this? Well, let me turn it on myself. I certainly don't read the room successfully all the time. We all have better days and worse days.
Sure.
In part, how many different rooms do you find yourself in? So, when we had a very difficult discussion before about terror and, religious terror, a lot of the time that I was thinking about that, I have my Muslim friends in my head, one of the things that I often say to people in the U.S. is that when they tell me that there is no connection between Islam and violence, I say, well, you've told me something you have no knowledge of. They say, what's that? I said, that you have no close Muslim friends. Because if you did, you would be at their table and they would be talking about this and the problem of religious violence. And being in that room requires being sensitive to a reality most people never see, which is the pain that every community has in its own problems. That we Jews have all sorts of problems. We have a white-collar crime problem sometimes, where very aggressive business practices go over a line. An example of a problem that I think we have. And I believe that we have a problem with humiliation in part of the Palestinian Arab population in Israel. If you're in enough rooms, you try to keep those rooms in your head. And you say, okay, well, how would my Sikh friends hear this? How would my how would my Christian friends hear this? If I'm addressing India and I lose track of the Dravidian divide and I, start referring to Indic languages, I've just lost, part of the country that really matters to me. If you're in enough different rooms, I think one of the things that happens is that you learn to be less strident, less moralistic. It's not that you lose your moral compass, but you just, I think compassion becomes really important, and you fuzz out issues and you show compassion, you show gratitude, and you show humility. One of the things that I find least fun about being public is the number of times I've had to say I changed my mind about something. I was wrong about X, about Y, about Z. I've been wrong about various things. And I've had to say, to large numbers of people, hey, if you followed me and you liked my points on that, I no longer believe that. So one of the things I find just really important is, I know the incident you were talking about at the wedding. Yeah, he wasn't reading the situation particularly well. But how many times have you or I been that guy? I'm worried that I'm that guy in this episode. No, I'm not kidding, right?
Yeah.
And I remember being on Rogan's show and him saying something that put me in an awful position. And he's usually incredibly diplomatic. There was like one brain fart moment, and I'm sure I've done that to him. You have to show compassion for yourself, for other people, and recognize that it's a process. And, one of the great dangers of becoming well-known through a medium like this is you start to take it for granted that people are going to recognize you, that they're going to think well of you. Just always realizing that this could vanish in an instant. We were talking before about Ranveer's situation where suddenly one brain fart undoes his entire life. And, recognize that we're always one step away from that being us.
That's true. We've almost come back to diplomacy and harmony where
There
we
you go.
started, right? Because as we've progressed in our discussion, I've begun to understand that I used to believe that if I meet someone like you, they would just be angrily telling me about free speech. But this is perhaps what happens when you go to several rooms. You learn tact, diplomacy. It's almost like less proclamation and more, like I don't know how to explain it. But I prefer that. I prefer that when I meet people, because sometimes I'm a little alarmed when I speak to some of my American friends. Not saying that my Indian friends don't say horrible things sometimes, but there is something in, saying it in a way which, it's almost like human beings have been given this gift to modulate language in a way which makes it, reach you in a way where the effect happens 5-6 seconds later. Like Oscar Wilde, right? Like he leaves so much to the imagination when he says something. I want to ask you, for someone who is interested in the sciences in this world and find themselves not particularly interested in AI, but just the hard sciences, how should they go about building an audience like you have for yourself?
I don't know. My grandfather said something which I interpreted, and I'm not positive what he actually said, but I interpreted it as the phrase, you owe the world your eyes. Your eyes may see something different than everyone else's eyes, and maybe your eyes are playing tricks on you. But, when I speak about science, I speak about science as I see it. And very often I'm told by the community that is sort of the official representative of that perspective, you're doing tremendous damage to the field. And I've grown old, and I've decided that they're out of their minds. Science is not the institutional representation of science. Science is a part of humanism. It's not at odds with literature or poetry. It's a question of learning. If I can make an analogy, Western music particularly orchestral music, is written as sheet music on staffs with lots of dots.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that no one could afford an orchestra, and somebody hands you Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. A small number of people can read that and say, oh, the beauty of this tune, the way he arpeggiates the major chord, this is unparalleled. It's just heartbreaking. I don't know how to do that. I need somebody to perform it. And that's really a lot of what's going on in the sciences. We trade papers between a tiny number of people who do not need a symphony to perform the paper. We don't know what is said. Like, behind you, I noticed that there is some sort of floral picture.
Sure, it's some random shit.
You say, but one of the most astounding things in the world is that you're based on an alphabet of 4 letters, and it's the same 4-letter alphabet. That's your cousin there, right?
This plant.
That plant.
My genome is related to this plant.
Yeah, your ACTs and Gs and its ACTs and Gs and the 20 amino acids that are coded for by 64 codons, which are the 3-letter words that can be written in a 4-letter alphabet. So 4 to the 3rd possibilities. That unifies all life. That's an astounding fact. That I can't tell you if you say CTAAGAGGCTACC. I don't know what that is. But there's a 12-letter sequence that codes for 4 amino acids that, when spliced into spike protein, brought planet Earth to a halt for 2 years. Right? So in other words, something, maybe nature, maybe Tony Fauci, maybe the Wuhan Institute of Virology, spliced in 12 nucleotides to code for 4 amino acids to humanize the spike protein so that it would afflict planet Earth's human population in a way that shut down a planet. That was like the performance of a tiny little tune. Right? So if I say, ye dos ti, but I do it as amino acids, suddenly the effect on the planet is profound. Very often what you need is a performance of science in order to feel its full power. And you're not getting that performance because what we do is we trade papers.
I remember the basketball with the flashlight in school, where the teacher wanted to show me what the effect of the sun looks like on a planet, right? It's something I can remember but I feel like people use reading scientific papers as status signals, and the average person is like, well, what do I do? I really enjoyed the fact that you got Ben Greenfield on your podcast many, many years ago. Now, many would say he's a very unscientific man, but I have greatly benefited from his experiments on himself.
Isn't that interesting? Because his theories don't really seem to hold much water at one level. And yet you can clearly see that his guinea pigging has had astounding effects. Right? And so this science becomes very precious. We don't recognize that what we are is scoundrels who dig up graveyards to do anatomy studies. That Benjamin Jesty, in a desire to protect his family, sucked out the pus of his cows and injected his children and wife because he noticed that his milkmaids never got smallpox, they got cowpox. So that was the beginning of vaccination. We're disreputable people, we scientists. And I just think that there's such beauty in that, right? Like all these people. Well, that's not a peer-reviewed study that appeared in Cell, Nature, or Science. Oh, really? And tell me something. What was Benjamin Jesty doing with that cow pus? You have no idea what science is. These people are filled with the letter and empty of its spirit.
Wow, you hate them with a passion.
Oh, it's not that. It's that they block the experience of understanding the world. I mean, the division, because we're in India, it's worth saying that half of the particles in the universe, the ones that make up the matter in this room, like this table, are named after Italy. Enrico Fermi, and they're called fermions.
Mhm.
And the other half that make up the force and that impart mass to those particles and keep them from speeding off the speed of light come from Bose. They're Indian particles, right? So the world is divided into Italy and India.
Mhm. One could say the same about one of our opposition parties as well. Um,
What I would say though is that um, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to get to know what the world actually is. You can find out so much uh, about our reality that was never known to anyone. Here's a simple suggestion to your listeners. Go to the Protein Data Bank, PDB, and look at all of the tiny nanomachines that make our bodies possible are called proteins. And some of them are like photocopiers. Some of them are like scissors. Take a look at the three-dimensional structure. You can rotate these proteins, these machines, all around. Nobody was ever supposed to see this. It was like an art museum that was created. They're gorgeous structures.
it's an online directory of
Yeah,
sorts.
it's an online directory where you can look up a protein. So, for example, I don't know if you know GFP, green fluorescent protein, which I think was isolated from jellyfish, from bioluminescence. I believe is this beautiful barrel made up of what's called a beta sheet folded on itself. If you want a place to start, try GFP protein. It is gorgeous. And you don't need to know anything. In some sense, this is the performance of the sheet music. So you can go go to a phylogenetic tree explorers. So, for example, we were in Kerala, and it was right before the election, and this communist boat.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to turn the AC off.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were in Kerala, and it was right before the election, and this communist boat comes around the bend, blaring its message.
I saw your Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were backed up in the shikar we were in, and I look up, and there are all these gorgeous mangoes just hanging there. And the guide says, no, those are the poisoned fruit. This is the suicide tree. Do you know about this?
No.
That some mango relative is completely poisonous. Now, usually, according to the theory of evolution, you come up with a very expensive sweet fruit where all of this nectar and flavor and sugar is packaged up to induce an animal to take the seed far away while it's chewing on its mango prize. So why would you create a poisonous fruit around a seed? It's because it's above a waterway. The water is the intended replacement for the animal. So in order to discourage the animals from carrying the fruit away, you make it poisonous. Genius. Wonderful application of Darwin and Wallace's theory. But I didn't really know how this worked. And there they were, these poisonous pseudo mangoes in Kerala hanging over a waterway. And it's just, what a wonderful, intricate world that's open to everyone. And then these people just ruin it. And then they have the stupidity to call me anti-science. I wonder, did they go to school? Did they miss did they have no soul? It's very confusing.
I have a friend who asked me to keep a piece of cardboard between my teeth, right here in the back teeth, and to point my left eye diagonally up here, and to hold a specific position with the body. I can't explain it really. And to exhale and to hold that while I move my head like this. And he said, what does your vision feel like now? -5 here, -3 here. And I could read temporarily the text on the posters outside. this person doesn't have a science degree. He's a pain coach. But in the process of trying to help heal his clients, he's just discovered things about the body that perhaps no vision correction literature would dare to peer review. But it's true because it happened to me. As someone with stunted vision, I could literally read something that is blurry to me and has been blurry to me since the time I had spectacles. But
Very, very fast.
yeah, it's I that's why I really enjoy the fact that you are a scientist, but you feel like the frontier of science doesn't belong to industries and institutions because in their attempt to preserve the status quo, they actually stop innovation.
Well, we haven't really solved this problem. So, as soon as I hear, my friend has a house, and I guarantee you that if you go there on December 17th every year, there's a ghost that comes down at midnight and walks the hallway. I think, oh God, I don't want to go to your friend's house on December 17th.
Yeah.
But what happens is that some percentage of these old wives' tales and whatnot, the wives are onto something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good example of this is ethnobotany of the Amazon, where all of these drugs that we've turned into pills, are known to indigenous people of the region.
Mm-hmm.
Funnily enough, there's this big question about ayahuasca. I don't know whether ayahuasca has come to you.
I mean, people do private retreats here and there, of course, illegally. I've heard about it, but
Okay. So it's the combination of two separate plants, one of which I think is a leaf or something. The other is a vine. And one of them is DMT and the other one is an MAOI. And how did these people in the jungle ever put this together? How do we know which mushrooms are poisonous, which ones are psychedelic, which ones are just tasty? There's lots of knowledge that isn't held by people who are officially scientists.
we dismiss them. But I think most scientists and people in the rational world dismiss them.
Well, or we eroticize. So, for example, I think the story of Ramanujan is not the story that's actually true. We decide that the great white mathematician Hardy plucked an obscure Tamil clerk out of a life of anonymity. But I think he was actually quite well known in mathematical circles in India. And so in a certain sense, we are always on the lookout for a good story. And Hardy, I do know that Hardy writes and he says, I have two conflicting thoughts about Ramanujan. One is that if he had only gotten more training, what he might have done because of the beauty and power of his mind. He says the other thought is, and if we'd done that, he would be much less Ramanujan. That in some sense, it was the bizarre feature of the fact that he came out of relative obscurity and without the benefit of the world's best formal training that made his gift so unique. And so in part, you have to be on the lookout for not believing the institutional claims too strongly, nor throwing them out too quickly. It's very hard to beat the core of science and to come up with something wholly new. So you saw this 3-eye atlas thing, for example.
The what?
This comet that seems to be somewhat strange, the third interstellar visitor to visit our solar system.
Okay.
And there's a question, is it just a comet? Because we only have 3 of these objects that have ever shown up from way out of town. We don't know whether to treat it as a natural occurrence or as, potentially alien visitation. And, my feeling is you should always interrogate your own desires. A lot of us want it to be aliens because wouldn't that be exciting?
Sure. I mean, podcast hosts are known to talk about aliens, but I just don't think about aliens a lot, to be honest.
Why is that? Because Indians don't as much as Americans.
Yeah, I guess in movies, every alien ship lands in America. It rarely ever lands in some other part of the world. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess America has all the Area 51s of the world and whatnot. I'm not sure what the shadow governments of the world, where they keep, maybe if they keep some aliens here, I'd, be
Well, you know
interested.
that the story is supposedly linked to nuclear weapons, of which India has several.
Sure. What's the story?
We don't know. I mean, this is just an interesting puzzle. Um, I used to think there was no story at all. It's a very clear situation where I was just wrong about something. I thought this was the dumbest thing in the world.
Hmm.
And it's very clear that it's a story about something. We just don't know what it's about. We don't know whether it's a fake US program to throw off our rivals, or we pretend that there are UFO visitations. We don't know if it's some sort of extraterrestrial contact. We don't know whether it's a cult inside of government in which all sorts of high-ranking admirals and politicians believe in a new religion. But nothing makes sense. It just doesn't add up. And so to not care about it is very strange. And this is one of the things that I'm very focused on in science. If something makes no sense, you should care, right?
Sure. Yeah.
This makes no sense.
It's just I've heard so many theories about some Americans believing that the government is run by reptiles and shit like that. So I don't indulge, but I see where you're coming from. I would actually love to read the private journals of those who've signed the NDA above the NDA because that would be interesting. Or just to peek inside their mind.
My claim is just don't try to figure it out. Recognize that somehow we are being lied to. We have no idea about what. We have no idea why. There is not a shred of hard evidence for alien visitation in the public domain that I'm aware of. And there's abundant circumstantial evidence that there's a massive secret program about aliens. And I can't make it make sense. But this is an example of what people don't like about science. They want science to either say, are there aliens or aren't there aliens?
Hmm.
We don't really know. We just know that it's very strange that there's no hard evidence in the public domain that makes this conclusive. And there's abundant circumstantial evidence that something is going on that's at least using UFOs and aliens as a cover story. And not resolving that. That's the weird thing. I don't know why it is that I'm pressured. I'm just observing two separate facts that don't seem to fit together. And that's what a scientist is supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to use your eyes and say, things aren't adding up.
That's like that movie, Don't Look Up,
What a crazy film.
right?
Right.
I loved it. It was,
I hated it
why?
because it's so close to reality. No, I'm not. That's what it's spot on.
Yeah.
We cannot save ourselves. We just can't. We can't concentrate. We can't recognize the gravity of the situation.
Is that what you tell your children when they are looking for optimism from their dad?
No, but
What do you tell them about the world? What's the worldview that you espouse to them?
the world has been as calm as it has ever been for about 80 years. And the mother of all tsunamis is headed our way. And everyone you know who isn't very, very, very old has lived in a bubble of relative placidity. Very little happened for a very long time in most of the world. Mao's Great Leap Forward was a big deal, giant disaster. Partition was horrible. But more or less since World War II, the world has been dead quiet. And things are just about to start happening.
Do you think we're headed into a cycle of war globally?
I don't think that covers it.
There's more?
Oh my God. I mean, what do you imagine this AI is? Do you think it's just another technological development? Do you think it's...
It has me glued to my toilet seat, talking to it forever, like it's a friend that I can just harass for free. It's changing the way I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's amazing. I assume yours is female.
No, I just talk to the Grok AI. I don't use ChatGPT. It's just easier.
Oh, I use ChatGPT. I use the
Okay.
female voice.
Okay. Or you speak to her.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not a romantic thing, and it's not that I ever confuse her for being human. It's just you can't combine different ideas with any human that you know if you know different things, like you can with the AI. So the AI is providing, if I wanted to talk about similarity between two cities, and most people haven't been to both,
Mhm.
the AI can always do that.
Yeah.
It's just drawing on so many different things. This is wherever we look, nothing much has happened, and we claim that we were in the process of dizzying technological advancement for a long time, and it was false. The internet was a big deal, so computers are more or less computers and communication are the two things that have been happening. But most things have been quiet, and I give the example to people: go into any room, subtract the screens, so your phone, the flat screen TV, the laptop.
Mm.
How do you know you're not in 1973?
I read a tweet once that said, if you go outside in the world, it's still 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. You're right. Because
Nothing
all,
nothing happened, right? And so now, well, think about quadcopters,
you mean the ones with two rotors?
four rotors.
Four rotors. Yeah.
Now, you need the four rotors because the degrees of freedom allow it to maneuver.
Okay.
Quadcopters were a big advance. That's something new that happened. Or, tomography. You couldn't do CAT scans and PET scans before
Hmm.
some period of time. The number of things like that is going to just blow up. And we're not ready for it. If you look at, I give people this example. If you look at photographs between 1902 and 1952, it's 10,000 years difference between the two of them. There was no powered flight until 1902. By 1952, we had thermonuclear weapons. So you have to recognize that sometimes nothing happens and sometimes everything happens all at once. And the first half of the 20th century was 10,000 years. And then largely things came to a standstill. Right now, it's just picking up. So I tell my children that's what's going to happen. Your lives are going to be dominated by the mother of all tsunamis. Get your board in the water, learn to surf. Good luck. I can't help you because I haven't lived it.
Wow. It's oddly optimistic and oddly fatalistic at the same time. This advice, because
Something amazing is about to happen, and nobody knows what.
what's something that remains? And I say this because me personally, as the world seems to go away from what I can understand, I go back to the tangible as a sense to find comfort. The table I can touch, the friend whose hand I can shake, the girl I can kiss, right? The book I can read. One could say that everyone has done that, where they start preserving the past and start becoming nostalgic and sentimental. But I feel like it's more and more an act of revolution to do that now, as opposed to doing it 11 years ago or 13 or like 30 years ago. It's this tangibility. Like I have a fucking film camera now that I'm using. It's not here, it's outside, where I'm clicking the pictures and going to the dark room and getting them
Yeah.
processed and waiting because I want something of the old world to remain.
Yeah, the Thorsten Veblen talked about this as the retention of antiquarian traits by the elite.
Wow. What is it called? Who talked about this?
Some guy. Never mind.
That's so funny. Wow. In a sentence, you've basically described the lives of so many.
Well, but we're looking for that connection, right? And,
Yeah.
my daughter just bought a sewing machine from 1909 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin. And she wants to be connected to something that she can actually wrap her head around and understand, which is this marvelous gadget that replaced, the painstaking needlework of a seamstress. I don't even know whether she knows that her great-grandmother was a seamstress, and we did not come from elevated stock. And, you said something you can touch like this table.
Mm-hmm.
So, my claim is if you watch kids who are raised on iPads, they do this thing on ordinary surfaces.
Oh, they zoom in and zoom out?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's right. Because that's, to them, every surface is potentially zoomable.
Yeah.
And you can go back to, I think, 2003, 2006, at a TED Talk. It's the first time somebody does this in an audience, and you hear the gasp. It's called multi-touch gestures.
Wow. This Cal Newport, the guy behind the book Deep Work, he said that our fingers aren't meant to scroll up, down, but they're designed for handicrafts and craftsmanship. I think if your daughter has bought that old sewing machine,
Yeah.
it's perhaps a return to something that's, how do I say it, tactile.
Yeah, there's a fancy way of saying this, which is techne versus episteme. And the idea is that the person who knows how to do something in their mind is practicing episteme, that's the analytic version of knowledge.
Mhm.
But the woodworker who knows how to sand, how to cut, how to join,
Mhm.
that person is engaged in techne. And so there is this moment where you realize that you can't do everything in the mind.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the rise of physical hobbies. I'm looking forward to the rise of leisure, even as a revolt to the excessive nature of the online world. I wanted to ask you one more thing, which is, before we depart, mathematical ability. You're a mathematician. So by definition, you are someone who does math extremely well, right? And I would say, who am I? Well, I'm someone who sometimes does math well. Actually, been using this app called Matix, which is like a social math game. And that really helps sometimes. But I've been in a constant environment of people telling me, well, your math sucks. And so I get a little afraid and I do less and less of it. And you said earlier that you can learn math at whatever time. I'm paraphrasing you, but you seem to say that mathematical ability is for everyone. Everyone can do it.
I wouldn't say it that way, but let me riff where I think you're at it and see whether we can meet. First thing I say is, if you haven't taken a concentration in math at a university level, you have no idea whether you're good at math or not. And this came as a shock to me because I wasn't good at high school math.
Really?
No.
So you were not a born prodigy at numbers?
I was terrible. I'm dyslexic and all sorts of learning divergences. Yeah. So anyway, I had a B- in high school math. But there was no way you were going to fence me out of understanding the language in which the world is authored. So I just decided to ignore it. I found out I was really good at major math. In other words, the language of proofs and rigor. We basically lie to people about math up until about, in the US, their junior year of mathematics. Almost nobody gets to that. I think there were 10 math majors at Penn when I was there. So roughly speaking, people don't know whether they're any good at math at all. It's tragic. And there's so many different ways to see math. I mean, there's a video series that I think is quite good called Dimensions on YouTube. And what's amazing about it is that it uses the visual cortex to explain mathematics. Where there's a shout out to Grant Sanderson, the channel 3 Blue 1 Brown. Particularly check out his Fourier series video in which he draws a picture of Fourier using Fourier series. It's just amazing what he can do. He's the world's greatest math teacher. And Sal Khan is somebody else I've met. Just a wonderful, one of the most brilliant people on earth. You know, we don't talk about him that way. But the number
From
of
Khan Academy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
How does he know all this stuff? How does he know all this stuff? So Sal, if you're out there, amazing stuff. Yeah, I think Grant Sanderson and Sal Khan are two of the people to follow. Follow the Dimension series of videos. If that appeals to you, check out a book called The Shape of Space by Jeff Weeks. These are ways in, if you're blocked, the usual route, you know, and just to pick up on the sheet music idea. Almost no culture on earth teaches music through sheet music. We have to do it in Western music because of harmony. So there's almost no harmony in Indian music. It's your harmony sucks. Your melody is on balance, on par with ours, and your rhythm is far light years ahead of ours. Like, we don't know rhythm at all. You guys are the undisputed kings. It's that harmony that required the sheet music. But most classical traditions aren't taught by reading dots on a page. It's a bizarre thing to have to do. And so if you say, okay, I took sheet music, you know, I took piano, and I'm no good at it, you don't know whether you're any good at music because nobody learns music that way except for a tiny number of people in the West. Right? And so how many illiterate human beings can pick up a bamboo flute or, you know, some kind of a lute or some reeded instrument and make beautiful music in I don't know, in the Nubian desert? Huge numbers. So mostly, you know, if you're having a block, if you're blind, let's say, and you can't read sheet music, you're going to tell me you're bad at music because you can't be in an orchestra? There are no blind guys in an orchestra. You're confusing one modality with another. My claim is that you have no idea whether you're any good at math.
So go off the beaten path.
Go off the beaten path. Take Grant Sanderson, 3 Blue, 1 Brown, Sal Khan, Dimensions, Jeffrey Weeks, Shape of Space. Try all of those. And if you still suck, then we could talk, but not until. Just don't imagine that you've been given a fair hearing.
So I'm assuming you mean these will expose you to the field of mathematics as opposed to what I'm referring to, which is mental calculations.
It's not calculations. Mostly we don't calculate things. Mostly we theorize about things. This mug, we would say, is homotopy equivalent to a donut. You can guess what homotopy equivalent means. It doesn't really look like a donut, but if it was made squishy and you could move it around, somehow it's got a hole, right? And I could also express that it's S1 Cartesian product D2, which doesn't mean anything to you because that's geek speak. But whatever it is, you can quickly figure out kind of what we're talking about if it doesn't go through symbols. If it doesn't go through calculations. That's what I'm trying to say, is that these people have gone through great difficulty in speaking or showing mathematics without these pages of symbols analogous to showing you Saint-Saëns piano concerto on the printed page. And I would also say Edward Frankel, University of California, Berkeley, is a professor who's doing a series called Aftermath. And hopefully that's going to be one of the premier places to really understand. Ed's one of the great geniuses in mathematics on the entire planet. I'm very active in the Geometric Langlands program. I would check out his stuff. Don't despair.
Maths is here.
Well, there's so many ways in. And he's written a book called Love and Math, in which I think he also talks about acting as an erotic. He performed naked in an art film called The Rights of Love and Math.
That's crazy.
And but it's also amazing, right, that he would have the courage as a professor in this most cerebral thing to take that Slavic Russian soul and breathe life. Because, in this thing, he tattoos a sacred formula that the government is after him on this woman, and she represents truth.
Wow.
Right? Because there are these two concepts of truth in Russian, istina and pravda, and they're not exactly the same. And I forget, he's got one of them on the wall behind her. So it's very beautiful, very erotic, very strange film, somewhat amateurish in my opinion, but it's also, if you're put off by how formal this is, no, this is passion incarnate.
I love it. This is the first time I'm hearing about the religiosity and passion of math.
Well, as I often say, I don't necessarily believe in angels, but I believe in 28 different differentiable structures on exotic seven spheres.
Eric, man, it's been an absolute blast having you in the studio today. I didn't know what to expect. I'm glad we went on this odyssey of a conversation. Looking forward to hang out with you and some of my friends afterward. And obviously, the few people in my audience that don't know who you are, you can follow him on Eric Weinstein on Twitter and elsewhere.
Eric R. Weinstein. Don't harass the guy with no R in his name.
Okay, Eric R. Weinstein. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Finn, really, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.